Okay, so I know this video has been requested for quite some time about how I made my SpringTrap mask. He's not done yet. He still has this one ear to be fixed and a few wires, but other than that, he's close to being finished. I do plan to make the whole costume. However, I think that's going to be in other videos. So this was just going to be about the head for now, and this method does work for other characters. I'm just not sure if you guys will be okay with that. But yeah, you guys who have seen my stuff on Instagram, you probably have been asking for this tutorial for some time now, and I'm here to bring that to you today. And I want to thank, by the way, the new 200 or so of people who have subscribed to me and got me to 500 in less than a week. Because just last week I celebrated like 300, and then I get 200 out of nowhere, which is great. That's amazing. Most of you guys have come to my channel and subscribed because of most of my horror VHS tapes that I've been making, and I do plan to make more. I'm gonna keep making more of those VHS tapes. It's just I'm not even close to finishing the series, so expect plenty more of that. I am gonna be doing some of the make your own animatronic from Blender tutorial. I got this tutorial. I got a couple of other videos that's gonna be going on my channel, but for now I'm gonna be showing you guys how I made this little guy right here.
Wow.
So the first step in making my mask is something that actually came out of a couple of other cosplays I've done, such as Genji from Overwatch, and I've borrowed this idea from other cosplayers, and it seems like this would be the right way to go about something like this if you want to go for accuracy, and that's to make a whole 3D model of the costume. So now what I've done is I've only taken the left half of the entire character model, and this is what we're going to be using to make our paper template. Now this is a model that I made, and it doesn't need to be super smooth or super detailed because this will only really show if you're using anything like paper, but we're not going to be using paper. So you can see I've tried to simplify the model the best I can and the best of my ability, using very little vertices, very little faces, very little edges. And what I've done here is I'm basically taking all the faces and all the objects in Blender, and I'm gonna go ahead and export it as an OBJ file, and you should be able to find that down here, wave format. After you're done exporting your model as an OBJ, you're going to want to go ahead and import it into a software called Pepakura Designer 4. Now what this does is it takes your model and it turns it into a paper template. So this is basically what it would look like if the entire thing was paper. Now when you first unwrap it, because you have the option on here, obviously I've already unwrapped it, so it's going to say undo, unfold. But when you unfold it, you're going to notice these things called flaps. And if I show you, by showing the flaps, you'll start to see in the template all these little flaps right here. The reason that these flaps are here is because if we were to print this onto paper and we wanted to use paper for our template, then we would go ahead and glue all those flaps together, and it would show us what the model would look like if it was all paper. So when you put together when it's paper, it gives you a better idea on how big your helmet or mask will be. In this case, we already have our sizes here, so we don't need to worry about that. And you can see I've also only have the left side, and I'll explain that later on. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the flaps, go to 2D menu, no longer show any flaps. We've arranged it in a way that we want, so that way we can print it. And then what's left to do, you come up here to print, and you print out your images.
So once you've gone ahead and printed out your templates, you're going to want to go ahead and cut them out. Now the best paper to use is cardstock. The reason you would want cardstock is because other papers like this are very flimsy, but for the sake of the video I'm just going to be using this paper. But it's always good to have cardstock. It's very sturdy, especially when you want to trace something onto EVA foam. You're going to need sturdy paper. So what I've gone ahead and done
is I've already cut out a few pieces. Now this is for the head. What's good about having the flaps for the paper, and you can always adjust this so that way you have the option to have flaps, is that you can always tape the flaps over each other and put all the pieces together, and then you can determine if you want the helmet or the mask to be bigger or smaller than what you already have. It's a good way to test the size of your pieces right before you put it all together, because by the time you've already glued all your pieces of EVA foam, it would already have been too late. Something that's also important is that we don't really need to print the right side, and I'll tell you why. Because when you have a left side, you can always flip the paper around to trace the right side. So you can always use the left side and repeat it on the right side. And that's if your object is mirrored. If your object is not very symmetrical, then yes, you will need to have separate printouts. But for the sake of this, we're just going to be using the left side, and then we'll do all the asymmetrical details much later. Now, if you aren't really confident in making your own model, another alternative you can do is either you guys can go download my model in my Patreon, and it's free, don't worry. You guys can download that model for free and then practice using Pepakura, so that way you guys can print out your own templates, adjust it to your size, and put all your pieces together to make a costume that's perfectly fit for you. Now this is a size that I fit for me, so you can always adjust it. If you guys don't want to go ahead and mess around with Blender and tinker with things there, then it would probably be best to go ahead and just download my Pepakura file, which I will also leave a link to. Something that would be very smart to do is if you have edges that need to be glued, what you would want to do is take a highlighter or a marker and just color in the edges with the same color on the parts that you want them to match with. In this case, these two edges right here, I would want them to be glued later on to those two sides. I don't have any other color. Am I just broke? Like, do I not have green or some shit? Take a color like yellow. We're just gonna color in that edge, so that way I know what edge this matches to when I start gluing later on. Something that would be smart for you guys to do later on is go ahead and take all your left pieces and you're gonna label them. So in this case, this is right here. This is a snout. This is the face. This is, I guess you can say, 1/3 back of head. I don't really know what to call that. Then this here would be the back of the head. Then another thing that would be smart to do is you want to draw an L on each one of your faces, so that way when you flip them, you can go ahead and label an R for when you're ready to do the right side. The trick is when you're cutting, and I'll explain that when we start working with EVA foam. Alright, so this is our EVA foam. The best thing to do right before you start cutting away, after you've had your layout set up, what I like to do is I have this silver leafing paint. It's really good paint, it's really good ink, especially when tracing stuff like this. You have a lot of ink, but we're basically just gonna go ahead around each edge and we're gonna trace it. Something that's also important, remember when I said that we weren't gonna be able to tell the edges if we were to color this, because red is hard to see on black. So one thing you would want to do is go ahead and take some numbers. So this would be edge 1, and then the same thing for this guy is wherever this edge lines up on the foam, you're gonna label that 1, and then this edge 2, and then wherever that goes to, edge 2, edge 3, 4, and so on. Now you might be asking yourself what kind of glue we would be using to glue two pieces of foam together, and the answer is with contact cement. Now this stuff, the air that comes off of it when you lay it down is very toxic, so I recommend you go find a well-ventilated area so you can lay down your glue, or wear some kind of mask that would help you so that you don't breathe in this stuff. This does affect your brain, and that's not very good. Now in other cases, if you just want to lay it onto the foam, I like to take a piece of leftover foam and I like to make a little brush out of it. I like to angle it at the end. It has like a nice little edge here, good for spreading the glue. Then go ahead and take our contact cement. We're gonna go ahead and lay it down on the edges. So now we won't just be dealing with one side covered in glue. You have to go ahead and collect the glue on both surfaces. The reason for this is because contact cement, when you have two surfaces covered in contact cement, once they're tacky enough, you can then go ahead and glue those two surfaces together. It will not glue to a surface without contact cement. Now, contact cement roughly takes around 15 minutes to start getting tacky. If you don't want to wait that long, what you could do is get a heat gun. You can find these at your local hardware store. And the heat gun has two settings. It has light and hot, or super hot. So we're just gonna slowly start heating up the surface in which we have laid down our glue. And you'll see it'll start to get lighter as you start heating it up. And this is normally what it looks like when it starts to get tacky and dry. Now you don't want to do it too much. We just want to heat the surface. And now you should see the edge has become a bit lighter. You don't want to do it too much. Another way that I should have mentioned, if you do end up making a mistake with contact cement and you bond two surfaces that you did not mean to bond, you can use a heat gun to heat up the surface of the glue. It'll start to get really hot and it'll start to get tacky again, and you may be able to separate the surfaces of those two pieces. So the great thing about EVA foam is that it's very soft, it's very sturdy, it's very flexible. I've already gone over these things, but one thing that's special about EVA foam that I don't think polyfoam can really do well with, or cardboard, is you can heat form it. Now, what does heat forming mean? Well, heat form means when it gets super hot and you were to bend it and then you let it cool, eventually the form of the foam will take that shape after you've done cooling it down. So the reason this is important is because things like the round surface of SpringTrap's head and all these other pieces, they aren't naturally going to go ahead and become curvy. That's what heat treating comes into play. Heat forming all these pieces will give it its natural curve, and you won't have any pulling when it comes to the glue. So I'll show you guys right now what we'll do. Take the heat gun and we'll just start heating this foam up. We're gonna do the same thing to the opposite side. We don't want to burn it. It is possible to melt EVA foam, but once you've noticed that smooth surface, what we're gonna do is we have what this is sort of like a spoon, a metal spoon. I forgot what you would call them. I just call it a spoon. And I have a wooden little leg right here that I've glued into this little pad here. And what this is for, it's to bend and curve the foam. So now that it's hot, now that it's warm, it might be still a little too cold. I was talking for too long. But once the foam is hot and you put it on a curved surface and you let it cool, this will keep its curvature. This is great, so that way the foam naturally already wants to be formed and curved. Just press it, get the curve you want. You want it to be a deep curve. You gotta go around the edges, push your hand on it until it's all cooled off. And look at that, it's no longer flat. It is now curved. Of course, this is probably better to do this before you lay your glue on. The reason is because now we've just heated up the glue and it's not as tacky as we would want it to be. It still will work, it's just not as tacky. So we're gonna do the same thing with this here. Now, another thing I want to teach you guys, this is something that also works before heating it up. If I were to scratch this foam, if I were to make little cuts in it, let's say I want there to be little lines and details repeated over and over again to make super high detailed stuff. All right, so I've already scratched it, right? Watch what happens when you heat EVA foam. The surface starts to get smooth, but remember, the little cells are tightening, which means the area that we just cut is getting wider and wider. It's being pulled open. And this is stuff I like to do when I'm making grill marks on other pieces of foam when I'm working for props and armor pieces. There's all these little greebles that I'm making that have caused a little incision are now really good details for when you're doing stuff that requires all those scratches. You want scratched metal, you want stuff that's been damaged. Well, you can do little cuts, and with a heat treat, you can form your own 3D cut, little divots inside the foam. So now we have our curvature. Now that the glue is tacky enough, we're gonna go ahead and slowly bind these two surfaces. We're just gonna push onto this, make sure that it's touched the whole surface of the glue. Look at that. It might not be as good as we want. You know, this is just demonstrating how you can glue your foam, but this is pretty stuck. Like if I try to pull this isn't coming off. I'm putting all my force into tearing this, and all it's doing is just stretching the foam right at the seam. But it's not coming off. It's contact cement. This is good. This is forever gonna stick on there. Now the great thing about SpringTrap is his entire exterior, his whole head, is made from that solid EVA foam. It's all painted. It's amazing. You can obviously see the seams that I was talking about all along here, and if you were to look closely enough, you can even see the ones down the middle, down right here. There's even some here, but that's a cut right there, so you hardly notice that. Same with this right here. But something that comes with the ears, and I've seen this with people who do the poly foam heads, or whatever foam you'd like to call it, it's always the cushion foam, is that kind of foam is not sturdy enough to hold up a metal rod. And that's what's underneath his ears. This isn't some kind of plastic rodding. These are copper rods, and they're metal. They're not really cheap, you know, aluminum wires that are super bendable. Like, you actually need a lot of, well, not a lot of force. I can bend these with my hands, but it wouldn't be easy to just simply bend it with my hands. I kind of need to hold it with some pliers, and you know, they add weight to the head. Now, something that's interesting is that people will use things like this on polyfoam. I don't know how they get it to stay on so sturdy, but when you glue on a rod like that to a polyfoam head, once you start rocking, all that weight to the ears will start flopping around. You're gonna break something. I don't know how they do it with sturdy polyfoam. That's cushion material. That's cushion material like his ears, where I could just press them like a pillow. That's not sturdy at all. However, with the EVA foam, shake him around as much as I want, his ears will not move. Now, this isn't the best ideal way to do it, but if I were to show you his insides, it's a little dark. I'll have to give you guys some light. So there's the battery, but right there, right in that little spot, what I've done is I've taken a piece of EVA foam and I've shaped it to be the same shape as the hole of the ear, and I've plugged that hole in. I've glued with hot glue on the inside. I've gone ahead and glued that piece right there to cover the entire ear hole. Then what I've done, these are not two separate rods. These are actually just one individual rod, each varying in length. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've taken that rod and I've bent it into a U. And then this right here, the EVA foam has two holes for each of those little rods. So right here where the glue is where I have the holes for the rods to go through. Then on the inside, those things that you see right there, that right there is the end of the rod that I've bent through the foam, and I've covered it entirely of hot glue. Same with that side. They're just one rod bent up like a fork, and I've pushed it through EVA foam, and the EVA foam is glued to the rest of the head, which is also EVA foam. But for those of you who think EVA foam is probably the best way to go for these ears, no, don't do EVA foam. I have something better. It's a little stronger. Jesus Christ, did the spray paint do that? I'm sorry, I'm just now like squishing this material, and oh my god. Okay, I'll show you guys the material. It's this stuff right here. Now, you're probably looking at it and you're probably wondering, what the hell is that? This is almost like packing foam. You can see, I can just about see my fingers through it. This is not styrofoam, okay? This is actually the same kind of foam that they put inside floaties. And what I've gone ahead and done is I've made cuts. It's the same pattern. You guys will probably use it when I give you guys the Pepicura file. But I've cut out all those pieces out of foam, and I still used contact cement. Contact cement will probably melt styrofoam, but with this foam, it's pretty sturdy. It's way stronger than it is with styrofoam, and it's probably just as good as EVA foam, although you can't heat treat this. This already has a gunky texture. But the reason I say you shouldn't use EVA foam is because EVA foam is a lot heavier than this foam. This foam is really light. I can throw this like a football. You know, this is a good light foam. Okay, so now we are gonna get into painting. I've already gotten started with by turning this piece gold. This is the last piece for his ear, and we're just gonna go paint the surface all around here and this ear part. Not sure what you would call this. It's like the inside of the ear. And this paint job works both for the head on the outside and for the nose, which is this part right here, and for the other parts of the ears. But we're gonna need these colors right here. We're gonna need a nice green. Something that I really like is the color shift green. This is a nice color shift. It has a nice reflectant of this lime green and a much darker neon green. You're gonna want this color shift yellow. So this sort of has a reflectiveness of orange and yellow. You're gonna want some black and some brushed metal copper. Alright, the next step in doing an authentic paint job is what I like to call buffing out. Now, when you buff stuff, you're basically withering it. It's taking all the deep marks and lower details and sort of giving them a dark color. And the reason we do that is because normally dirt can find itself in many tight places that you couldn't really clean. So if I were to brush my hand over the surface, anything that sticks out higher will be, wiped away. But all those little cracks, that's where dirt gets lost in. And it's kind of hard to clean. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some black paint and water it down. We're just gonna mix it up a bit. We're just gonna brush all that on the surface of our earpiece. And you want to do this to the rest of your paint job too. So we're just basically withering this. All that black paint is going to get into all the deep areas. And this is great for withering. Make sure to get it all on the edges. You want to deep it in those crevices. Get it all in those seam lines that, we're trying to hide, but in reality, we're just trying to make them more defined. And basically, after we're done coating the surface in the black paint, we're going to take some paper towel and we're going to go ahead and just wipe the surface. And you're left with this pretty grummy and dirty look. So you have this side versus this side. This is clean now. It's going to get all grummy like this. Alright, so now I actually got his ears done, which means the head is pretty much complete. So you got everything from his ears to all his wires. I think I still need to put wires in his ears, which is interesting to talk about because all the wires glued on to his face are real wires. These are all scrap wires that I have from all my LEDs. There's a ton right here. There's a little tuft in the top, all the bunch on the side, the ton that hang here. So the next thing I think we should talk about are the eyes. So I'll go over the LEDs later, but basically these eyes, I'm not sure if you can already tell, but how I can see out of these is because, well, it's a mesh. It's a plastic mesh You can get at your local craft store. If you aren't able to find them, then you can use fabric, very mesh-like fabric that you can glue over. But I thought, since I have leftover fabric from, those two animatronics that I made, Golden Freddy and Withered Bonnie, so I went ahead and I painted on the white area. Then I softened the edge, so the outsider is a dark red. Actually, I'm not sure if you can see, but it's a dark red. Then I did the black for the big dot. Then the grayish sort of featherish edge in the middle, and I try to paint the dot white at the center, but then I realized that's where the LEDs are gonna go. So I kind of had to cut out a little hole for the LEDs to fit in, and this is so that way they get lodged in there. But once they already are in there, they kind of are loose, so I had to go ahead and super glue them on the inside. But I didn't glue on the mesh to just the EVA foam head. What I've gone ahead and done is I went ahead and I started to make, I'm not sure if this is bright enough, but I made kind of like a mask. So this right here, this is a very thin mask that I painted into the shape of William Afton's fleshy eyes. And I'll show you exactly what craft foam looks like. They come in a variety of colors, but the one I had left over was a brown. Now this is basically 1 millimeter of EVA foam. Now you can see it's almost like paper. It's very floppy. You can heat treat this. That's what I've done with this. I took ahead the heat gun and I just went ahead and started heating up the eye shape. It's almost like a sleeping mask. You can see it sort of fits in that shape, but basically you don't really want to overheat this. This takes less time to get that nice shine and to close off the cells than it would for a 10 millimeter one. So you do not want to overheat this, otherwise you'll start noticing if you overheat it, it will start to wrinkle and start to curl up on itself, and you don't want that. So it is good to heat it up so that way you have a smooth surface to paint on, and that's what I've gone ahead and done here. I've painted the pink metallic sort of purple skin tone, and I'll show you the exact paint that I've used. So the tone you guys can get for the fleshy material, you would start off with a red, a nice solid red. This is your base color. You want a lot of the red in your base color. Then a drop or two of this purple, but then these two you want to use a lot of. This is the color shift red, which reflects like red but also has a reflectant of purple. And then you have the color shift purple. Now this reflects as like a nice blue, and that's how I got all these nice undertones, is with these paints. Color shift paints look remarkable. You might have to add a few layers or two, but then once you've done that, you have to glue the plastic mesh onto the eyes, the thin layer of William Afton's eyes. You have to make the mask first, then you want to go ahead and glue on your mesh eyes. Then after that, I would recommend you cut out where you want your LEDs to go. And I do have a little circuit diagram right here that shows how I made it. It's very simple. So literally I took the switch off from another LED thing and I just went ahead and hooked it to my own little setup here. But that's pretty much what it looks like on the inside as well. So you have your LEDs here all the way up to the battery there, and so I can switch this and now the LEDs glow. And no, they don't really bother my vision because, to be honest, I see right underneath them. I see right underneath the LEDs, so I don't have a problem seeing. And the LEDs look great. The jaw works fine. I think I might need to put a little bit more leverage right here so that way my chin has something to hold onto, because I sometimes find myself with my jaw slipping right out of the mask. But that's pretty much it for the mask. I mean, everything else is pretty much finished, and that's pretty much how I got this mask. I know I'm saying pretty much a lot, but that's all I can really think of. And I hope this tutorial was helpful, because This took a lot of work, and a lot of people have been asking to me, but I just summarized it with the most simple way I can. So I hope this goes into more detail on how I made it. This will count for other masks in the future. Other things like, you know, if you're looking to make Withered Freddy or Withered Foxy, Withered Chica, I'm counting the Withereds, but literally any animatronic, Ennard, the Fun Times, this works really well. Especially for something that needs to be smooth and almost rustic and metallic, or if you're going for something chrome and glossy, something that's like shiny, like a toy. This is probably the better way to go with EVA foam. And that's pretty much all there is to it to make a nice little SpringTrap mask. Now, of course, I'm going to be doing more tutorials like this for the rest of the body, unless you guys sort of figure it out on your own, but I like this method a lot. I think this will work great for future cosplays such as the Fun Times who really need that glossy shine, and for the toy animatronics, who knows, maybe someone's going to make a Nightmare Balloon Boy, Marionette maybe, Nightmarion. The possibilities are endless because you can get accurate results, and I like it very much, and it's quite comfortable as well. A little bit of a tight squeeze, but other than that, I think this would be great for Halloween. Getting a chance to scare the kids, you know. Or maybe not scare the kids. Maybe you want to use it to, I don't know, ask them to come play, show them around, take them to a nice place, promise them something that really isn't there. And then go
ahead and take their lives.